My grandfather Derek spent most of his life in silence about the war. Medals on the wall, black and white photos in a dusty album, and the occasional "war was hell" line if you pushed. Then one day, completely out of nowhere, he asked me if I wanted to know how he met Grandma. What followed wasn't some cheesy love story. It was grit, betrayal, stolen kisses, and a truth that shattered what I thought I knew about both of them. It started on a Tuesday. A boring, gray-ass Tuesday, the kind where even your coffee feels like it gave up. Grandpa was sitting in his usual spot by the window, wrapped in one of those hideous plaid blankets the staff insists is cozy, watching birds do nothing exciting. I was scrolling through my phone, ignoring the faint smell of antiseptic and sadness. He hadn't said a word in 20 minutes, and I figured it was another one of those quiet days. Until he said, "I met her during an air raid." At first, I thought he was confused again. He had a habit of blending the past and present, so I gave him a quick glance and muttered, "Met who?" He looked at me. Like, really looked at me. That sharp glint in his eyes that said, "I know exactly what I'm saying, so shut up and listen," snapped me straight. Then he said, "Your grandmother. I met her in a cellar under a bookstore in Rouen." Now that got my attention. You have to understand, my grandfather was the strong, silent type. A textbook stoic. He had medals, sure. Newspaper clippings. A drawer full of foreign coins and mystery patches. But when it came to the war, he barely told me a thing beyond the basics. We landed. It sucked. A lot of people died. Boom. Done. He hadn't even said the word France in the last 10 years. And now he was talking about love? Romance? A cellar under a bookstore? So, obviously, I did what any sane person would do. I shut the hell up and let him talk. He said her name was Emily, with a little curl at the end like the French do, which he somehow still pronounced perfectly despite his dentures clicking every third word. He said he first saw her the same day his unit rolled into the ruins of Rouen in 1944. Most of the town had been blown to hell, but this bookstore, tucked between two collapsed buildings, had somehow survived. Kind of. Inside, the place was wrecked, books everywhere, shelves torn apart, windows shattered. And yet there she was. A girl sitting behind the counter like it was just another Tuesday. Reading. You know that movie moment where everything slows down? Apparently, that's exactly what happened to him. He walked in looking for shelter, a sandwich, hell, even a toilet, and instead he saw her, calm as hell, reading Hunchback of Notre Dame like she didn't even notice the war outside. He asked her what she was doing there. She looked up and said, "Surviving." No bonjour. No fear. Just one word: defiance. I could practically hear the sarcasm in her voice from the way he told it. He kept coming back. Said he made excuses to swing by with rations and reports. Claimed it was about checking on the civilian status, but I'm pretty sure the man just wanted an excuse to see her again. You don't drag a half-rotted apple 4 blocks through a war zone unless you're chasing something more than small talk. Now, here's where it gets messy. He wasn't the only soldier who noticed her. Enter Lieutenant Collins, a walking pile of American bravado with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Collins had a thing for attention. Loved showing off, loved making sure everyone knew he was in charge, and especially loved being the center of every conversation. So when he noticed that my grandfather was spending a little too much time visiting the same civilian girl, he started sniffing around. I asked Grandpa if Collins liked her too. He smirked and said Collins liked himself. She just didn't laugh at his jokes, and that pissed him off. That was the first time I heard my grandfather curse at someone in uniform. He called Collins a peacock-brained prick, which felt weirdly poetic for someone who used to make me eat oatmeal with no sugar. Apparently, Collins got possessive. Started making not-so-subtle threats. Asked Emily inappropriate questions in front of other soldiers. Grandpa said it made his blood boil, but the moment he punched a superior officer, his ass would be court-martialed and sent home in shame. So he held it in. Until one day, Collins cornered Emily in the alley behind the bookstore. And that's when things changed. Grandpa didn't go into full detail, just said he intervened and that Collins ended up with a dislocated shoulder and a very public chewing out by a French priest who witnessed the whole thing. But I got the sense that intervened might be doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Either way, Collins never came back after that. Whether he transferred or got himself in deeper trouble elsewhere, Grandpa never found out. Or maybe he did and didn't want to say. At this point in the story, I realized two things. 1. My grandfather wasn't just a war veteran. He was a hopeless romantic with a mean right hook. And 2, there was a hell of a lot more to my family tree than casseroles and passive-aggressive Christmas cards. He ended that first story arc the way only he could, by yawning, looking out the window, and saying that was the first time she held my hand. I didn't even notice the sirens. Then he closed his eyes like he was done for the day. I sat there, stunned, wondering how many more chapters were buried under that wrinkled old shell of his. Turned out we were just getting started. The next time I visited Grandpa, I brought a notebook. No lie, I had to dig it out from a box labeled college crap in my mom's basement. It still had some old econ notes in it, but that didn't matter. I knew I wasn't going to remember half the things he said unless I wrote them down. The man wasn't just retelling memories, he was dropping history like it was tea. And I had a feeling we hadn't even hit the good stuff yet. Sure enough, as soon as I sat down, he nodded like he'd been waiting. She didn't fear anything, he said. And just like that, we were back in Rouen, 1944. According to Grandpa, Emily wasn't just a civilian hiding out in the ruins. She was actively helping the local resistance. She'd smuggled messages, hidden weapons, helped injured fighters slip past German patrols, all while pretending to run a broken-ass bookstore that had no real customers unless you counted desperate GIs looking for cigarettes or directions. She had guts, he said. She once told an SS officer to piss off in German. I asked if that was how she ended up in that cellar he first mentioned. He smiled. She took me there during an air raid. Said it was safer than the barracks. That line might sound romantic now, but it was literal back then. The cellar under the bookstore had reinforced walls and a hidden exit. She'd helped dig it out years earlier with her father, who died in the first year of the occupation. Her mother had been sent away not long after. No one knew where. She never talked about it. Grandpa said Emily never cried. Never broke down. Not even when bombs shook the floor and dirt rained down from the ceiling. She would just close her eyes, hum a tune, and wait it out. And he? He was falling for her hard. He told me about the nights they spent down there trading stories, eating stale biscuits, playing cards with missing corners. No candlelight kisses or dramatic confessions. Just stolen time. And the understanding that every second was borrowed. She told me once Grandpa said that the war taught her how to love quickly. No room for pretending. I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't say anything. Just kept scribbling in my notebook like a maniac. But then things got darker. He started talking about the informant. Some French guy. No one knew his real name, but everyone called him Lou Rat because he always seemed to know things he shouldn't. The resistance suspected someone was leaking their locations to the Germans, and it didn't take long before fingers pointed at Emily. She was too calm, too well-fed, still had clean clothes when others were wearing rags. And the kicker? She spoke German fluently, better than most locals. Her mother had taught it to her as a kid, back when it was just another language, not the voice of the enemy. That was all it took. One whisper from the wrong person, and suddenly Emily was being watched by her own people. Grandpa said he nearly lost his mind when he found out. He confronted the resistance leader, a man named Henri, who apparently had the warmth of a wet sock and the loyalty of a cat. Henri didn't like that an American soldier was interfering. Didn't like Emily either, if we're being honest. Grandpa said there was tension there, the kind that hinted at history. And not the good kind. It all came to a head one night when Emily disappeared. Just vanished. The bookstore was closed. The cellar was empty. No sign of a struggle, no note, no clues. Grandpa said he searched every damn street in Rouen. Checked hospitals, barracks, alleyways. Even asked German patrols under the pretense of tracking a missing translator. Risked getting shot for asking too many questions, but he didn't care. 3 days later, she walked into his barracks, bruised, muddy, and more furious than he'd ever seen her. Henri had tried to detain her. No official arrest, no real charge, just some backroom justice based on rumor. She escaped in the middle of the night by cutting through a wooden wall with a goddamn butter knife. That's right. My grandmother went full jailbreak mode over a pack of lies. And when she returned, she didn't hide. She walked right up to the center of town where Henri liked to stand and puff his chest in front of the others and slapped him so hard his hat flew off. Public. Loud. Unapologetic. The only reason he didn't retaliate was because several actual townspeople started clapping. That was the moment Grandpa said he realized he wasn't just in love, he was screwed. Because of this woman? She was wildfire. You didn't contain her. You just prayed she didn't burn everything down around you. Now, I know what you're thinking. That should have been the end of it, right? She's vindicated, the resistance shuts the hell up, and Grandpa gets the girl. Yeah, not so fast. Because while the town's gossip mill simmered down, there was still one person who hadn't forgotten any of it. Lieutenant Collins. Oh yeah. He was still in the background, festering like a bad wound. And apparently he didn't take too kindly to seeing Grandpa get the girl while he got the cold shoulder. Grandpa didn't know it yet, but Collins had started his own little rumor train. And the ticket? Treason. But that Grandpa said was a story for another day. And just like that, he leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and left me hanging with nothing but my scribbled notes and 1,000 unanswered questions. This wasn't just a love story anymore. It was a damn war within a war. By now, I was hooked. I'd stopped bringing snacks, forgotten about checking my emails, and my notebook was starting to look like a mad ant's diary, scribbles in the margins, arrows pointing between pages, entire sections written in all caps. Grandpa, for his part, seemed amused by how obsessed I was becoming. He didn't even wait for me to settle in that day. He just dived straight into it like he was back in uniform again. This is the part, he said, where everything went to shit. Fantastic. Story time. So, remember Collins? The human peacock with a badge and a grudge? Turns out he wasn't just bitter, he was dangerous. After Emily humiliated Henri, Collins decided to take matters into his own hands. Only he didn't confront Grandpa directly. That would have been too easy. Too clean. Instead, he started a quiet campaign behind the scenes. He told their commanding officer that Grandpa had been seen meeting with a known civilian multiple times, that he was frequently absent from his post and might have been compromised emotionally. All the classic Cold War-level bullshit decades before anyone coined the term. Now, most of the unit knew Grandpa wasn't a spy. He was reliable, hardworking, and not exactly subtle when it came to his crush. But the higher-ups didn't like anything that smelled even remotely like insubordination. And fraternizing with civilians, especially French ones, was a gray area at best. So instead of confronting him, they started monitoring him. Quietly. And Grandpa knew it. He said it felt like the walls were closing in. Every move he made was questioned. Every visit to Emily's shop was suddenly a liability. They moved him to supply runs, less visible, more isolated. Basically a punishment without the official paperwork. Then came the sabotage. One night, Grandpa was sent out to deliver a crate of medical supplies to an outpost about 10 miles out. It was a routine job, boring, actually. But when he got there, the supplies were missing. Gone. Empty crates, torn seals, and a report already waiting for him when he returned. Apparently, someone had tipped off the base that he might be smuggling contraband. It was total BS. He knew it, they knew it, but it didn't matter. Perception was everything. The next morning, he was marched into a public hearing of sorts, nothing official but humiliating all the same. He stood in front of half the unit while his commanding officer listed off vague concerns about his loyalty. Collins stood nearby, pretending to look concerned, but Grandpa said the bastard couldn't wipe the smug off his face if he tried. They didn't court-martial him. That would have required evidence, which they didn't have. Instead, they reassigned him to clean-up duty. Literally shoveling rubble. A symbolic slap in the face. Stripped of respect, purpose, and practically forced to vanish from sight. But here's the part that actually made me want to throw something. The day after his public demotion, Emily showed up at the base. She didn't sneak in. Didn't send a note. She marched right up to the front gates, asked to speak to the officer in charge, and when they tried to turn her away, she caused such a scene that Grandpa had to be dragged out of his dirt pile just to help calm things down. I still had dust in my boots, he said. And there she was, yelling at a sergeant like she owned the place. Apparently, she'd found out about the sabotage from someone in town. Word travels fast when everyone hates the same guy, and Collins hadn't exactly been discreet about planting whispers. Emily, being the chaos goblin she was, decided to handle it the way only she could. She waited until roll call the next morning when every soldier was standing in the yard, lined up and silent. Then she walked right into the formation, again, no invitation, just pure gall, and slapped Lieutenant Collins across the face. Not just a tap. A full, echoing, cinematic slap. Right in front of everyone. According to Grandpa, it was so loud a bird took off from the mess hall roof. No one moved. No one spoke. Collins looked like someone had unplugged him. And Emily? She didn't even blink. She turned to the commanding officer and said, loud enough for all to hear, "If you trust that man's word over my friends, perhaps you're fighting the wrong war." Then she walked out. Grandpa wasn't sure if she practiced that line in the mirror or came up with it on the spot, but either way it left the base stunned. Now, you'd think the kind of public humiliation would lead to Collins getting in real trouble. Nope. This was the military in the 40s, ego over justice every damn time. But it did put a spotlight on the mess he'd made, and suddenly the higher-ups weren't so eager to keep punishing Grandpa without cause. They couldn't admit they were wrong, of course, but they stopped pushing. Let him finish his tour in relative obscurity. It was the last time he saw Collins. The guy got reassigned shortly after and disappeared from the record. Probably found a new unit to poison. As for Grandpa and Emily, things didn't magically fix themselves overnight. There was still tension with the resistance, mistrust hanging in the air, and the war grinding on. But they stuck together. Quietly, stubbornly, recklessly. He'd sneak away to see her when he could. They exchanged notes hidden in library books. Shared meals in silence just to be near each other. She taught me French slang, he said. I taught her poker. I asked if he ever considered marrying her right then and there. He shook his head. She didn't want a wedding during a war. Said if she was going to wear white, it wasn't going to be next to a pile of sandbags. Fair enough. He paused after that, clearly tired. I started to pack up, assuming we were done, when he suddenly muttered something under his breath. She wrote me a letter, he said. After I was shipped out. I froze. A letter. He nodded slowly. Never saw it. Not until years later. And by then, well, everything had changed. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to say anything. Because I already knew what the next story would be. The letter didn't show up until 1973. That's almost 30 years after the war ended. For those who suck at math. Grandpa was married to Emily by then. Had 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, and a garage that never had space for a car because it was stuffed with useful junk. You know, in case the Soviets ever showed up and demanded a rusted-out lawnmower blade. Anyway, the letter. It arrived in a weather-beaten envelope that looked like it had been mailed from another dimension. Postmarked from some storage facility in England, redirected through 2 military channels, then sent to the wrong address before finally ending up on their doorstep like a ghost from the past. Grandpa said the handwriting stopped him cold the second he saw it. It was hers, he said. Before she ever said, I love you out loud. She wrote it. Backtrack a bit. Near the end of the war, Grandpa's unit got orders to move. No warning, no goodbyes. One day he was sneaking croissants to Emily under the table. The next, he was being loaded onto a truck bound for the Ardennes with a busted rifle and half a canteen. He tried to get a message to her. No luck. Chaos was the default setting back then. But Emily, being Emily, had already written him a letter. She gave it to a local contact who promised to pass it along via the next American courier. That contact, it turns out, was arrested the following day. No one knew what happened to the letter after that. Until 1973. By then, Grandpa and Emily had lived through a marriage full of weird jobs, quiet fights, loud kids, and a mutual obsession with gardening. She'd never mentioned the letter. Maybe she assumed he'd read it and didn't care. Or maybe she forgot, though knowing her, that seems unlikely. He opened it on a Saturday morning. No dramatic music. No thunder outside the window. Just a man sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of instant coffee and a crumpled envelope addressed to a boy he barely recognized anymore. She poured everything into that letter, he told me. Everything I didn't hear in person. It wasn't flowery. No my darling or eternally yours kind of crap. Just Emily, in her blunt, matter-of-fact way, saying she was in love with him, that she didn't care if the war swallowed the world. She wanted to be with him when it ended, wherever that was. She even joked about punching Collins if she ever saw him again. She said love wasn't supposed to be convenient, Grandpa said. It was supposed to be chosen, over and over. I asked what he did after reading it. He gave me a tired smile and said, I cried like a coward in the laundry room so she wouldn't see. He never told her. Not then. He kept the letter in a locked drawer, under a stack of tax returns. Like a secret he wasn't ready to unpack. But secrets have a shelf life. Until I showed up. He said telling me the story wasn't some grand decision. It just felt like time. Like he'd held it in long enough and maybe, just maybe, someone else should know before it got lost in a box somewhere. I asked him what he thought would have happened if he'd gotten the letter during the war. Would he have stayed? Deserted his unit? Tried to marry her on the spot? He shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe I'd have gotten myself killed trying. That's the thing about history. It's a messy, unpredictable bastard. One delayed message, one misplaced rumor, one jealous officer, and your whole life tilts in a different direction. And yet, somehow, they still ended up together. A week after Grandpa finished telling me everything, he passed away in his sleep. No big send-off, no teary final conversation. Just a quiet end. Like he'd finally exhaled after holding his breath for a lifetime. We didn't find the letter until 2 days after the funeral. It was tucked behind a photo in one of his old albums. The one where Grandma's holding a baguette like a sword and he's laughing like a doofus. I gave it to her. I figured she'd seen it before. She hadn't. She read it slowly, without a sound, just her eyes scanning the page over and over like she couldn't believe what had been sitting under their roof for decades. And when she finished, she didn't cry. She just smiled, pressed the letter to her chest and said, "He always did save the good stuff for last." She still talks about him like he's just in the next room. And honestly, with a love like that, he still is.